And you're a go.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Chris, Christopher Kim. Some people call me Kwan, mainly because Chris is such a common name. But yeah, I am one of the technical leads over at eWorld Enterprise Solutions. And pretty much what I'm going to go over today is how, I guess, modern tech companies use no and low code solutions pretty much in our projects today. So I guess for a quick bio, so I have been coding for about 10 years. I've been coding professionally over at eWorld for a little over 5 years now. And yeah, I mean, I just love coding and I love learning and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty much it. I'm a pretty boring person, so there's not really much about me. So yeah, I'm gonna go into the presentation now.
Oh, Christopher, let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference on questions? Do you want them to interrupt you? Do you want them to just put them in chat? Do you want to take breaks just so they know how to like ask questions? Do you have any preference?
I think that my presentation is pretty short, so I think I'm gonna just take the questions at the end. I think that getting the full picture will maybe open up some questions.
Okay, so everybody you heard, feel free to put them in chat so you don't forget them, and then we will go answer them all at the end of the session. Okay, thank you, Chris. Sorry to interrupt. Back to you.
Oh yeah. Also, I gotta mention, I have some dogs, and they kind of bark at everything. So sorry if you can't hear me at times. But basically, for the agenda, it's kind of changed. It's changed since pretty much we sent in the event description, mainly because after I kind of thought about the presentation, the original presentation was more, I guess, architectural focus and that kind of stuff, and basically kind of showing what you can do with low code and all that type of stuff. But then I saw that, Microsoft and, Salesforce, they're giving their presentations. And if we were to just duplicate the information, and they probably would have done a way better job at explaining those kind of things than we do. So I think we kind of pivoted and shifted to kind of more focus on a hackathon or coding challenge style agenda, something that could give you the perspective of, a fellow programmer, and kind of how like we use it today actually, at work and that type of stuff. Okay, so while creating this, I was like, okay, what would make this workshop useful to these participants? And so that's going to be the first question I go over. And then I'm going to go over basically kind of like a brief history of how, we built applications in the past and how we build them now. Then I'm going to go ahead and introduce no and low code to basically how we use it, what it is, do a brief overview of that. I'm going to demo one of our apps that was pretty much fully built using a low code platform. And I'm going to take the Q&A at the very end. Okay, so before we start, I'm going to go over this. So is no code and low code the same thing? No, it's not. And so no code and low code are two different things. But for this talk, we're going to use the terms interchangeably. And you can think of it this way. You can think of it as building an application using only code versus building an application using another application. So rather than dragging and dropping things to make the final product, the application, that's going to be just building an app using an app versus custom coding everything to build the app. Okay, so putting it in those two type of buckets, I'm going to be using no code and low code pretty interchangeably during this talk. So I'm going to go into why this workshop is going to be useful, and I'm going to kind of approach it from the perspective of, I guess if I were to attend a workshop and I'm participating in this event, what would have been helpful to me as a participant to a hackathon or a coding challenge. And so then why is this useful? And the main point that I want to get across is your solution for these hackathons and for your coding challenges is always going to be greater than the work you put into it. So what I mean by this is that for hackathons, usually it's like a 24-hour format. For coding challenges, you might have like a month or something. But basically, at the very end, you have to pretty much present your solution, that presentation, and pretty much what your final application looks like, right? And you can kind of bundle that up into your solution. So presentation and your final app. Now, you can make your app and all that kind of stuff super awesome, like optimized. You can use like the hardest algorithms. You can make it like technically super difficult. And you can do that and you can have a lot of fun with it. But you have to keep in mind that your presentation is going to be a lot more important. And the reason for that is because the judges that you're presenting your solution to is honestly not, you might have some technical judges, but even if they are technical, they're not going to really fully understand, because they're not going to like go in depth and think like, oh my goodness, how did they pull this off? They did this and this and this. They're not really going to think that. They're just like, look at the idea, look at the app and be like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And then that's pretty much it. So I'd say that if you're going to spend like 30 hours versus like 2 hours, and it kind of produces the same thing, but one is like way more harder to implement, but it's like way more performance, like there's a lot more performance and way more optimized versus just like getting it done in the 2 hours. I would say just get it done in 2 hours. And the reason why this kind of all ties in with the whole no code and low code is because a lot of people really kind of focus on optimizing and all this kind of stuff when it comes to building applications. And that's good and all. But what these no code and low code platforms allow you to do is that it allows you to build things really quickly. And honestly, they're also pretty robust for how quick you build them. Like if you were to build something super quickly using only code, you probably have a lot more bugs compared to how fast you can build it in these no and low code solutions. So it's kind of giving you that perspective. Okay. So I guess to kind of give my own experience, this is one of my hackathon applications that I've done in the past. It was called Sticker. And instead of the ER at the first sticker, it was AR. And mainly because it was an AR and VR type of hackathon where alternate reality, virtual reality. And the idea was that you can print these and create these stickers, and then pretty much you can slap them on a laptop or like a water bottle and you can scan it and you can see like images and stuff like that. And basically, the idea is simple. It had 2 functions, but a little bit more functions, but these are 2 main ones. One was to create the QR code using the image link. And the second was to scan a QR code to produce the image. Now, when we thought of this idea, honestly, creating the QR code is pretty easy. That took maybe like an hour of work. And to scan the QR code, we saw this tutorial from Apple on how to use Swift to pretty much produce a 3D image inside of your alternate reality application. It's a 30-minute tutorial. So we're like, oh, great, this thing's going to take like an hour max because like 3D is the hard part. 2D would be super easy. But when we actually built the application, it turns out it's really hard to implement 2D inside of this alternate reality, because if you render a 3D object in AR, pretty much if you walk across the room, you can see just a different side of that object. But if you render a 2D image, that 2D image pretty much has to face you at all times. So it's to pretty much calculate where you are. So let's say that your phone is kind of like your eye. You have to pretty much track all the angles and stuff like that and exactly where your phone position is to point that 2D image to you. And so then, of course, that's you have to calculate all these angles, and you have to also account for this thing called light. And if the light hits the thing a certain way, it kind of messes up these angles. Okay, anyways, and it was hard to implement, and we took a long time implementing it, but we eventually did implement it. But honestly, it took away from the time we could have spent on the presentation. And so then we kind of completely messed up our presentation. 1 second. Sorry, I'm gonna hold my dog the remainder of this workshop. But basically, it took away from the presentation, and there were some technical judges in the panel. However, they're not like how we thought that it was going to be easy to implement 2D. They also thought the same thing. They didn't really understand how difficult it was to really get that to work. The only people who really understood were the other hackathon members who were also trying to get it to work, but they couldn't. But it doesn't matter because you're trying to win, right? And basically your presentation, since we messed up our presentation, all that work kind of went to waste. So I think that I kind of went a lot into kind of like a hackathon and that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna go into pretty much, I guess, how we use no and low code in, I guess, our company today. Before we do that, we're going to go into a little history time. So in the past, whenever we get an application or when we get like a project and we have to build the application, we have to choose, all of the things that we're going to use to build the application, right? So at that time, no and low code platforms did exist, but honestly, they were not that great. So it's not really viable to use them. And so then what we did was that we just custom built everything, whether it was a small application, a medium application, a large application, we used the same thing. We just custom built everything. And the pros and cons of that is that, yes, you have the power to implement anything that you want. The sky's the limit because you can custom build everything. But the cons of that is that it's very expensive because, well, first of all, as a tech company, you have to pretty much hire developers, and not every developer has the skill sets that you want. So let's say you're building like a React application, you have to get React developers and all that kind of stuff. Second con is that it's very time consuming. So even if it's like a small application, you have to actually build like your work environment and all like your dev environment, and you need to make sure everyone's dev environments are working, and you need to then start building out the code and all that kind of stuff. And it's just pretty time consuming, even if it's a very simple and small application. Then if you're implementing it yourself, you need to pretty much learn how to code. So that's also kind of a con. Because the learning curve for learning how to code is a lot higher than learning these no and low code platforms. And last, but this is probably the most important, it's pretty hard to maintain custom applications. Even if I were to build the application and maintain it myself, 1 year ago, Chris building an application and writing that code, the current Chris would be like, oh my gosh, what is this? This code is terrible. And I'll be like, what the heck is going on here? Like, how does this even work? And so then even if it's the same person maintaining it, it's pretty tough to maintain. Whereas for no and low code platforms, like let's say you want to change something, like you have a table and you want to make it like a multi-select table instead of like a single select table. It's like literally a drop-down click. Rather than you have to find, exactly where the table is, and you have to find the exact properties, and maybe you have like another property that's like preventing that from happening when you change the class or something, all that kind of stuff. Okay, And so I'm going to kind of go over why we actually use Noah and low code platforms today. And plain and simple, it's because that it's now viable. You know, they've gotten a lot better, and they're like actually they're robust and they're good. And the components that you use just out of the box, they work great. And before you could use like a default button yourself in custom code, and that would be better than the button that would come out of local platform before. But now it's like these local platform components are just like so insanely built that it's so easy to use as well. Okay. All right, so this is kind of the main point of the talk. I know that whenever we see a lot of these presentations about no and low code, some of us might be like this picture and be like, oh my gosh, please no. Like, I'm a programmer, I code, I don't want to use a no code or low code platform. And this was me. Like, this picture is literally my brain before I was a believer. Whenever someone said like, okay, we're gonna use a local platform for the next project. And I'm here to kind of, not really convince you, but kind of, I guess I'm here to convince you to use these platforms, because it is a tool that gets the job done, and it is a viable solution today. All right, so I'm gonna go over the pros and cons of no code and low code. The first pro is that you can build apps really quickly. I'm going to overemphasize how fast you can build it. It's like, if you've built a lot of custom apps in the past, and then you start using a no code or low code platform, how fast you can build things is pretty eye-opening. Like, once you like look back and realize, you're like, wow, it only took that long to build that. Yeah, it's a lot faster. The second pro is that there's less bugs in the final solution for how fast it was built. So let's say that I were to build a custom application and I only had like a month to do it. If I were to just, start writing a bunch of code, it'll probably be very buggy. But then since these components that come out of these low code and no code platforms are heavily tested, and you have people like Microsoft building these platforms, it's like they work great and they are not very buggy, and for how fast you build it, your app is going to have a lot less bugs. And the last pro, of course, but not the least, is it's easy to maintain. You could pass this off to someone else, and for them to really understand what's going on, of course, it's going to take some time, but it's going to be way easier to understand what's going on and quickly fix the issues and the problems compared to a custom build app. Okay, so the cons is that you are kind of limited in terms of flexibility, because you're kind of at the mercy of how the component was built in the no code or low code platform. So let's say you have a button and you want it to work a very, very specific way. It might not support that specific configuration that you're looking for. And so then if you need to build an application that have very specific, and where you need the UI to be very customized, then I'll probably not use a no code or low code solution. But that's to say, honestly, they do support pretty much everything. Usually they support pretty much everything, but when you get to a very advanced level of, I guess, customizing your UI components, then you might run into some issues. So that's a little bit of a con. And then the second con is probably a learning curve. When you first start using a low code platform, you have to know kind of like where all the drop downs are. It's kind of like the learning curve that you have of picking up a new application. I guess an example would be like, I say I'm pretty tech savvy, but when Instagram changed their UI to upload Instagram post, I kind of had a hard time finding it. So I had that learning curve of finding how to make posts again on Instagram. So it's kind of like the similar thing where if you're using a new application, you just have to really figure out how to use it. And once you know how to use it, you can keep, you can keep doing the same thing over and over again. Okay, so I'm going to go into how we at eWorld use low-code solutions. A lot of our newer projects are going with these low-code solutions because the speed at which they're built and how strong and how like robust it is, it's like unmatchable. And honestly, it's you cannot compete with it if you're building a custom app in the same amount of time. I mean, unless you have like a bunch of developers and you have a really good like orchestrator orchestrating these developers, then maybe. But most of the time, these low code platforms are going to be way faster. Our enhancements to older applications are being built with low code solutions. And that's because usually a lot of the enhancements are like pretty small things. And it's like, oh, we need to get this to work. It's like, oh, I can build that super quickly, using this low code platform here. And then I can just deploy it really quickly. And then we can just like call it as an API. So a lot of our enhancements are being built there. And a lot of the way that we kind of architect things is that it's become a lot easier to reuse components, mainly because when you see what's deployed out there in a lot of these platforms, it's pretty easy to see what's out there or what has been deployed or what has been made in the past. And so you can kind of reuse the components pretty easily. And so then it makes application development for like the newer projects for the enhancement a lot easier because you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel a lot of the times. And a lot of our APIs have become reusable. For example, one of our APIs is slowly becoming used in like 3 different projects when it was meant for only one project, stuff like that. Okay, and so for the demo, I'm gonna do a quick demo of what we've built using a local platform. And I'm gonna give a quick, I guess, overview of what the application is. So the main goal of this app was our agents are, let's say that there's an agent and they need a place to look up case data. And that was the main goal. They just need to have a place to look up case data. Pretty simple. And some of the other requirements were that it needed to be built ASAP. So we needed, like the agents needed this like as soon as possible. So it had to be built fast. Honestly, the logic is not too complicated because the API was already there. We just needed to pretty much hook up the data to a UI. And the UI that they're going to use is very basic. Like it wasn't customized. It wasn't like a game UI or anything. It's very basic, just looking up people and showing their information. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into the demo. I'm going to start sharing the presentation. And I'm going to go into my browser window. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this incognito window. So this is something that we built only with a local, we use a local platform called Boomi. And the UI was built with it's called Boomi Flow, that's their UI. And then Boomi integration for the API. And so then the authentication is done with our own Azure AD. And I'm gonna just log in real quick. One second, I'm going to do my 2-factor authentication on my phone. All right, I should be logged in now. And I'm gonna go in. Okay, So when you get into the application, the UI is pretty basic. It's gonna just let them know, hey, you can search for a case here. And then when you get into the case, it's gonna let you know all the information. All right, so of course, all this data is not real. So I'm gonna show you how you could use it. So let's say you want to look up a client. Then you can go ahead and fill in, one of these input fields and then click search by client information. When you do that, it's gonna of course load, and then you can select a case out of the cases that came back based on what you've inputted up here. So as you can see, the information has people like Ross Geller and Rachel Green. If you don't know, those are characters from the popular show called Friends. I'll be honest, I didn't really watch Friends, but I know it's very popular, so I use those names. So I'm going to go ahead and select this case here. And I added a loading timer just to show this loading indicator, but I might have made the time a little too long. I think it's like 10 seconds or something. So let's just wait for 10 seconds real quick and then get in here. So once you get in, you can pretty much see all the information. And you can open up these panels, these sections to see more information. And yeah, it's pretty basic. All you gotta do is find client and get into their case so that you can, if a client pretty much calls in and they ask for, like, oh, how is my case doing? You can pretty much just answer any question that they have. That's right here. Now, since, these agents, their use case wasn't that hard, we could easily build this out super quickly. So we built out this UI within like 2 weeks, rather than if we were to build out all these things and hook up everything for an actual application, like a custom built one, it would have probably taken like, I don't know, 2 months, to make sure that the bugs were are all taken care of and stuff like that. But with a local platform, you can pretty much set up these tables, set up these all of these fields here really easily. And a lot of the components look pretty similar, like it's just information at the top or just a table inside of a panel. So if you want to change something, you could just easily reuse that component again and again and again. So yeah, this is just one of our many applications that we've built. And this one specifically used a local platform only. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back over to the presentation. And I'm going to just go over to the okay, so that's pretty much the presentation, and hopefully this kind of showed you that it's actually being in use in tech companies today. So if you feel like, like, okay, why are all these companies pushing these no and local platforms? It's because it's actually being used. It's because, when people say that it's going to actually help your resume, it is going to be beneficial to your resume because a lot of the tech companies that you apply for are going to be using these local platforms in the future. And it's just unavoidable because of how easy it is to make applications nowadays with these platforms. Of course, your coding skills are going to be useful because it's gonna pretty much mesh in. Like you're gonna build some parts of your application with low code, and then you're gonna build some parts of your application, customize using like custom built, code. But it's all gonna mesh in the future to build like the final product, pretty much in the end. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open up Q&A. And the first question that I was going to answer that I thought a lot of people might have was, will having experience with no and low code platforms be beneficial to my resume? And the answer to that is yes. We are using a lot of it now in at eWorld, and I think that from what I've seen, we're going to keep using it more and more in the future as well. So it will be definitely beneficial, because just like how if you're to know React, if you were to work on a Angular application, some of these skills are transferable. If you were to work on one local platform, working on the next local platform, some of the skills are also transferable. So getting any experience with these platforms and having it in your resume is going to be very beneficial. Okay. Sorry, it was kind of all over the place. I kind of got a little hectic with my dogs there. But are there any questions? If you have any questions, I can go ahead and answer them right now.
So Joel or Dean, do you have any other insights to include? And maybe stop presenting your screen and then we can have them show up as well.
Sure.
So Dean or Joel, do you have any other comments that might help the attendees today think about these solutions and these approaches?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Thelma. Hey, so guys, I'm Joel Bonko again, one of the VPs at eWorld. So we definitely see the industry moving to low no-code solutions. So, you know, as you kind of look at just the industry as a whole, I think this is definitely a good ground floor opportunity for you know, aspiring developers to take maybe a hybrid approach, because I think, you know, what we tend to see, especially with people aspiring for like a computer science degree, for example. I mean, they're pretty much into wanting to do full stack development. But you know, one of my recommendations is just to be open as, you know, the industry starts to pivot. I mean, especially like, for example, here in Hawaii, you know, we call it the silver tsunami, right? Meaning there's a lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers that are retiring, and you know, so we've got the up and coming millennial and Gen 2020 generations that are you know, slowly coming up in the workforce. And I think you will see industry wise kind of a pivot. So with that said, I would say you know, be open to doing full stack development, as well as looking at opportunities to do low no code solutions. And you know, most vendors have it, you know, whether it's Google and you know, GCP or Microsoft or Amazon, Salesforce, ServiceNow. I mean, those a lot of our big vendors today provide low no code solutions. And if you guys are interested, especially at eWorld, you know, we do offer up opportunities for aspiring developers to get an opportunity to have some experience in the workforce. So we do have intern positions. So if you're interested, you can always go to jobs@eworldes.com and submit in your application. So yeah, so that's it from my side. Hey Kwan, question for you is there anything that you have that you could kind of see what the sausage factory looks like on the back end? I mean, is there anything, just to kind of give an example, like that was a really nice UI and, you know, something that we built, you know, fairly quickly, but is there anything that you could, you know, show or demonstrate underneath the hood to see what it looks like?
Like the API?
Yeah. Just a real quick, you know, at a glance of, you know, what a low no code solution looks like on the back end.
Sure. Let me try and let me just log in real quick.
Oh, okay, great. Hey, and then while you're doing that, does anybody else have any kind of questions? And no shame, you know, feel free to type it in the chat.
Yeah, if you don't want to like get on screen, feel free to, you know, do it stealth style.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hi, Joel. My
Yes.
name's Eric, and I just had a quick question with regards to what you talked about for the silver tsunami. is that a rise in like customers or in terms of resources? So you're saying like there's a boom in or there's like a higher number of like Gen Z or Gen X folks. But I guess my question is, are you referencing that rise as in potential developers or potential customers that you're going to service?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think on our side, it's going to be opportunities for workforce development. So I think if you're an aspiring developer, there's going to be a lot of jobs opening, both in public sector and in the commercial space. And then the especially here in Hawaii, right? I think we do our best to try and move the needle technology wise, but it is a little slow. But what's going to happen is, a lot of the workforce that has been, doing development and, a lot of the older stuff, including, COBOL programming. So those that workforce is going away, right? And then, it's out of that is emerging a new workforce. So to answer your question, it's more around opportunities for new and up and coming developers because as the workforce leaves, the older workforce leaves the workplace, it's going to open up more opportunities for the new folks. And what we've seen trend wise, just across the state, I mean, many organizations are moving towards, cloud native applications. And, a lot of it is kind of leaning towards the low no code space. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So one, during the height of the pandemic, one of the things that we got involved with was safe travels. So we over a weekend had to stand up a call center for safe travels because we had travelers that were coming into Hawaii, either tourists or military or college students, as well as returning residents. So we stood that whole system up over a weekend, and we used a lot of low no code solutions to get that up and running. If we were to have built that out, using custom code, it would have taken us at least a month or two, and in this situation, it took us just a weekend. So. But going back to your question, it's more around, workforce development and opportunities, meaning more jobs for people. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah,
all right,
it did. Welcome. Thank you.
Ikhwan, back to you.
Yeah, so if I were to show kind of like what the back end looks like when you're actually using these low code platforms, is that usually you're going to see basically a lot of these. They call these things called shapes. And what you do is that you pretty much drag and drop one of these shapes and you pretty much like configure it. Like this is a message shape, so you can just like add a message. And then you could go ahead and save it. And then if you need to return this message, then you can pretty much just connect it over to the returning documents. And so now when you run this process, it's going to return this message along when you're returning the response to whatever's running it. There's a lot of very helpful shapes here that makes programming a lot faster. Like a lot of these data processing shapes that allows you to pretty much convert stuff. For example, if you have a file that's in XML and you need it to pretty much convert it to JSON, you can pretty much do that super easily with like one of these data processing shapes. You just add these processing shapes. Or for this one, let's just say that you just want to do a search and replace. So you want to search and replace anywhere in the text where it says hello, and you can replace with the text bye. Then once you do this and click OK, then if you're to connect a message where it had a bunch of hello, bye, hello, 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 and then connect that shape with this data process, then pretty much the resulting message will have all the byes because you have this data process doing all the search and replaces for you. Okay, so doing these simple tasks, it's just a lot faster rather than writing the code yourself, just using a lot of these data processes and stuff like that. And a lot you can usually also reuse a lot of these processes by doing like a process call. So I can give an example from one of our actual APIs. Actually, without getting too in depth with what's happening actually in the APIs, you can pretty much just call any other process by, for example, if I want to use any of the other processes that are over here, I can just choose one of them and then choose one of these options, click OK. And now I have that process as a sub process in this current process. So it's very flexible. It makes a lot of things reusable and stuff like that. Is this kind of what you wanted to show, Joel, or?
Yeah. So
Mhm.
Quan, I mean, just for this specific function, which is get case benefit history, if you were to have done this, this specific piece using custom code, I just wanted to see what, if you were to compare, like if this function on how you just did it now, using these shapes versus building
Mhm.
out, a piece of custom code, what would be the difference in level of effort?
So if I were to go fully in depth with it, first of all, you have to make sure that you can connect to that data source in your application. So you have to set up that data source, right? So let's say that this data is not coming from your main database, it's coming from another database. You need to set that all up in your app. You need to go deep down into configurations and make that happen. Then once you are able to connect to that data source, then you need to they need to create all the SQL queries and stuff like that from that. Of course, you can use SQL queries in here as well, but then you can also kind of extract data pretty easily here by just choosing like a table and just extracting the data here and kind of filtering it down. Or you can actually filter it within a lot of these shapes and stuff like that. So saving times, you save a lot of time with a lot of the configurations because you can just add data sources really easily here. For example, you can add like a database shape here, and you can choose from a lot of these connections that were previously made before. So you don't have to keep reconfiguring all your connections. You can just reuse a previous connection that was already configured, and then you can just extract data from it straight up. And if another application has already done like some sort of extraction that is very similar to what you need, then you can just reuse that and then pretty much work with that data basically with your process. So with this one in particular, it would have taken me probably, I don't know, like a full day to make sure that everything is set up correctly if I to do it in custom code. But with this, I can probably set it up within like, I don't know, an hour because all the stuff was already there before I started. A lot of the connections and stuff like that.
Next one. And then, part of this specific solution is the fact that, I mean, as you look on the left, you got Microsoft, you've got Oracle, you've got Salesforce, you've got SAP. So, in terms of, leveraging this specific tool from a low no code perspective to integrate other applications, I'm assuming if you were to build your own custom integration, it'd take you a whole lot longer as opposed to using a tool like this.
Yeah. And it's easier to test too. So testing is a big thing. You can just literally just run a process here just by testing. But like whenever you make code changes, you have to, restart your entire server and your web server and all that kind of stuff. So the testing, the iterations go by a lot faster in these platforms rather than if you to implement yourself, which is very big.
Would you see that there would be, from a maintenance and operations perspective, is it a lot easier to be able to maintain this over a custom application, just care and feeding and hygiene wise, over a period of time?
Yeah, I'll say so because if you're to look at a code base and for you to really understand what's going on in a code base, a lot of times you have to, you're really at the mercy of how the previous programmer, coded that piece. So, if they use the wrong variable name to really explain something, then you might get confused for a very long time reading that variable name and be like, huh, this says it does this, but it's not actually doing that. And so then for you to like wrap your head around a lot of these things is kind of hard. Whereas a lot of these are kind of like, a lot of these shapes have options and you know exactly what's happening just by looking at the option. And so then in terms of maintainability wise, really understanding what's going on is going to take a lot longer in a custom app rather than really figuring out what's going on in like a process here. You can just look at these shapes and be like, okay, they're setting a property here. They're generating an access token here to pretty much set up this bearer token to use for this, for the authentication and this HTTP call. It's boom, 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 boom. But then in the code, if it was like set case, but then it's like, oh wait, is that case number? Is that you're setting the case object? And it's like, okay, and then it's like, oh, I'm getting an access token suddenly. It's like, okay, is it actually getting the access token? And then you look at the code, it's like, it's not getting the access token. It's like, oh, okay. But like with these shapes and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to read what's going on.
Awesome, thanks, Quan. Any other questions from anybody? Either type it in the chat or just unmute.
So I would like you to, there was a question from Ed about which customers. Now I'm listening, but I'm not listening as closely. So could you just make sure that everybody heard the answer? And, I know you were talking about like the choices over on the left-hand side of your screen. So maybe, Dean answered him in chat, but maybe make it verbal so that other people can hear the answer to that question.
Sure. So Ed was asking what technologies we would use or what products we would use at eWorld. Pretty much it just depends on the situation. I mean, in this case, we were using Boomi. Like Quan said, it was already set up for another project that was using the same data that another project we're working with our client is using. So yeah, it just depends on the situation. And I do see there was another question from Naomi. Someone who might be considered mid-career age-wise, but wish to break into a tech or tech-adjacent career. What should I focus on upskilling? How would you suggest getting relevant experience?
Great question.
Yeah. I kind of have an idea, and Joel and Quan can probably add on to it. Quan already mentioned some of the code that I like to say reverse engineer when there's a programmer that leaves, retires, moves on, whatever the case is. But when it's a situation like that, we got to reverse engineer. And one of the things that I learned over the last several years of my career and whatnot in technology, a lot of it is the problem solving and understanding what the customer is actually trying to solve. So that's one of the challenges. Like the technology is there, and I think anyone can pick up the technology, and it's good that folks know how to program. But some of the things that I see is like a challenge to make the connection of why something was built in the first place. So Quan went over that situation where he's trying to decode the code of a variable, and it's like the person's gone. We don't know the context. Yeah. So that's one of those things that I would suggest problem solving and understanding context.
And then let me add to that. Thanks, Dean. Hey, so Naomi, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing definitely in the industry is kind of the rise of these low no-code solutions. And then here in Hawaii, I mean, we're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So maybe it's it's going to answer twofold, Ed's question as well as your question. You know, what we're seeing now in the industry, you know, most of the big name players have some low no code solution. So it really depends. Like for us, I mean, I would say 95% of our business is with state of Hawaii departments, education, transportation, ETS, which is a CIO's office, Department of Labor. And, you know, well, one of the things that we see is just kind of platforms across the board. For example, it could be Microsoft's Power Platform on the Google side, GCP and Firebase. On the AWS side, I mean, you know, there's a whole plethora of products there. So one of the things that we do is we'll lead with what our customers have, and then we'll kind of start. We'll start from there. And I guess, and our goal is to really match up, you know, their people, processes, and technology. Because one, I mean, for example, if they've got an aging workforce, and you know, a lot of them are leaving, there's going to be a combination of developers that want to do custom application development to ones that want to do low no code. One of the things that I think is important is, especially now with low no code, Naomi, is this role of business analyst. And the reason why is the business analyst, one has to really learn the functional requirements of the stakeholders. And then they also have to learn the tech. So that's a great way if you're going to try to do a mid-career pivot, is to potentially take a look at that. So that's one option if you want to start from a business perspective and then transition into various technologies. Or on the tech side, if you take a look, you know, a lot of the big players have their solutions deployed, and very often there'll be kind of free workshops. So I mean, the ones that we see are all the typical Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, ServiceNow. Those are very common products that we see here. Does that, Naomi, and I think Ed, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Welcome. Ed, how about you? Was that good, or did you need more detail?
See a yes in the chat.
Oh, okay. Raja. Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any questions? Did we miss anything? All right, Thelma?
Yeah, so you guys are awesome. Thank you again for here. I'm going to stop the recording. They don't have to hear this part of it. I mean, okay, let me just say this. You guys are awesome. Thank you for doing this today. It's greatly appreciated. And I want to emphasize to all of you that the message I've heard across all these workshops is how important this is going to be for the future development cycles. And thank you, Dean and Christopher and Joel, for reiterating your perspective, because you guys are agnostic when it comes to a particular tool to use. And so this is what I want to emphasize is come to these workshops, learn everything. It will help you. Please take advantage of eWorld's offer for not mentorships, I'm sorry, internships. These are things that are really valuable in the long run for getting work and keeping it and growing as an employee. It's also really viable if any of you are interested in entrepreneurship and want to start your own program or your own company. So these are the tools that you need, and these are going to become more and more prevalent. But as Christopher also pointed out, having the background of coding will make these tools easier. I've tried to use them. I don't have a coder background. I have been able to use them, but I often hit a wall. I hit a wall at the point where it needs a little more tweaking, and even though the no or low code programs have a lot of like coding persona in it, right? So be aware that these aren't these are not going to preclude any of the trainings or understanding. That gives you a foundation upon which to build these less code-oriented apps and maintain them, or easier for not only yourself, but for your subsequent, somebody else takes it on. You know, you want to be able to get promoted into a new job and have somebody else take over the app and not be stuck in place. So Joel and Dean and Christopher, especially because you were on the screen the most, thank you so much for today. And this recording will be available approximately end of day, Monday. Just depends on how fast we get them translated into YouTube. They present better from there. So thank you all again for coming here. Let me